Father Andrew Carrozza, and it gives me a great honor and a privilege to announce our guest speaker for today's luncheon. He was here last in 2011. Father Carrozza.
We want more.
Father Carrozza, he celebrated his 28th year anniversary of ordination May 12, 1990. Currently serving not only as pastor of St. Anne's in Yonkers, New York, but also serves as the New York State Chaplain of the Order of the Sons and Daughters of Italy in America.
You're smart. Wow.
Father Carrozza especially enjoys working with young people, and he will give us some reflections on what he has learned through this ministry to young people over a span of 28 years. He enjoys blogging, and at the request of several parishioners, he has begun to post the Sunday homilies on his blog, which can be heard if you are interested in at fathercarrozza.com. So, without further ado, great pleasure, Father Andrew Carrozza.
Thank you, everyone. I must say I'm happy to be back with you after 7 years to be able to speak with you today, and I'm also honored and humbled at the same time to notice that you had to set up extra tables for the crowd that came in, so my goodness. I do want to spend a few moments, as you mentioned, talking about young people in our world today and in the church. And there's a lot of questions out there about how do we reach the young people, how do we bring them back in. We know that young people more and more are not coming into church today. And I could bore you with statistics, I'm not going to, about numbers or anything like that. I'd like to share with you just some of my own experiences of working with young people and what I found has been effective in getting them active into the faith. When I was first ordained, the first parish I went to, the teen club there was in shambles. One of the meetings was so small, we actually held it on the roof of one girl's car, one of the young adults. It was herself and like 3 other people, and this was officially a meeting that we had. Within a few years, we had a group that had over 70 kids coming on Sunday nights twice a month. Now, the teen club we have maybe about a dozen kids who come faithfully. And if we really get lucky, we have 20 people showing up for it. If I compare the two groups, I will take the group that we have right now over the group I had 28 years ago any day. Why? Because those 70 kids who came to Teen Club back then were coming basically, most of them for only one reason, because it's the only place their parents would let them go on a Sunday night, and they came just to talk to their friends. And they didn't want to do any of the activities we had planned. If we even tried to talk about a spiritual topic, they were totally disinterested in it. Some of them would even make fun of the topic we had chosen. And so even though I was praised at the parish council for all the kids coming, oh my goodness, Father has 70 kids coming, it was absolutely babysitting teenagers twice a month is all it was. Whereas the kids who come now, there may be a smaller number of them, but they're dedicated. They want the faith, and they want what the group is about. I'm actually even happy to see one of our former members, Christian, who is here, was one of my teens in Teen Club in St. Anne's when he was in high school. I'm happy he came here today. And the teenagers that are involved in our parish, I'm finding are very much into the faith. Some of the people here are parishioners of St. Anne's, and you know what I'm talking about. You've seen these young people very active. And what have they done? First of all, they're running on their own initiative. They have chosen to do fundraisers for Make-A-Wish, for Toys for Tots. They have an annual Fight Cancer Day where they have a basketball tournament and all sorts of other things connected with it. They've raised thousands of dollars for charity. They're involved in everything in the parish. I have active teenagers sitting on the parish council and not just smiling and nodding, but taking an active part and role in the life of the parish. When we introduced Christ Life into our parish a few years ago, normally they say Christ Life should be 18 and above. But I told the person who was involved, I have some teenagers who are pretty active in their faith, very much into it, that I'd like to get involved. And she said, well, she goes, if you think that they would work out fine, then by all means bring them. So I got just a couple of them to work together with me, and they started inviting their friends. One year we had 2 full tables of just teenagers at Christ Life. And they weren't just sitting there doodling or doing other things while the other people were praying. In fact, if anything, when I would come around towards the end and looking at the tables after the discussion period, a lot of times the tables with the adults had ceased talking about the topic and had gotten into chit-chat, and they go over the teen table and they're there with their heads bowed praying. And they've been instrumental in bringing other people back into the faith. And of course, they have a great effect upon the adults as well when they see young people active. It gives them hope for the future. And I've been proud to say of the young people we have involved, if they are the future of the church, then the church is indeed in good hands. Now, they may not be a large number, but they're dedicated, and they're reaching out to others. And in that, I see what I've learned from this is, I think, the mistake we have been making over the years about how to deal with teenagers. Like my first parish, we were counting them, being impressed by how many teenagers we can get involved in things. And many teen clubs and youth ministry programs are nothing more than opening the gym and serving them pizza. And we might praise ourselves for thinking that, well, this is great, we've got all these kids coming, but are we really doing anything? Maybe we're just thinking that as long as they're on the grounds of the church, that's something good. In a parish or a neighborhood where it's an alternative to being out on the streets getting in trouble, fantastic. But when you're not in a parish like that, such as mine, where the kids are not out in the street getting in trouble, in fact, to come and be involved with us, they usually have to sacrifice other things to be there. I find the big mistake that we often make is not taking them seriously. I think the first mistake that I would like to pass on to anybody who's trying to work with young people, don't patronize them. Don't underestimate their spirituality. Yes, it's true that there are many teenagers where the last thing in the world that's on their radar is God. That is definitely true of many of them, but not all of them. In fact, there are many teenagers who are capable of and do have great faith in God, and often what they need is just to be connected with other kids who have the same feelings, and they support each other, and they build each other up, and they help each other grow in their faith. And I saw that happen about 2 years ago in our parish, one of our teen meetings. Some of you may recall about 2 years ago, there was a sad situation at Fordham Prep where within 2 weeks, 2 different boys had committed suicide. And one of the boys in our teen club was a student at Fordham Prep, and he asked me if we could pray for them at the beginning of our prayers at the meeting, as we always do. And I said, sure, of course we will. And then he said, I'd really like to talk about this. And then one of the girls chimed in and said, yeah, I've had a friend who had talked about suicide. Can we talk about that? So I looked to the others and I said, you guys want to talk about this tonight? And they said, yes. I said, okay. So I put aside the whole topic that I had planned and talked with them about teen suicide and, why teens might be led to it, what signs we could look for and everything. By the end, one by one, they started opening up with personal things in their life. Who talked about his father was alcoholic and gives them a lot of grief. Another one whose parents were fighting and, the father always likes to blame him for things whenever the mother is mad at him. Another one says she was raped, and this and forth, and all different things going back and forth about their life. And they started reaching out and ministering to each other, being Christ to them. I sat back and just let them do the work. And I was amazed at what I was seeing there. And I said, that was a better meeting than I'd ever had with 70 kids coming, and spending half the time telling them to be quiet. A moment such as that, I said, this is where I know real ministry has been done because the teenagers are now ministering to each other. And I've had several of them where I've noticed some of the younger teens going to the other teenagers for counsel on different things. Even a few of them, I've had a kid who was a little difficulty. I could turn to one teen or another and say, hey, could you take this kid under your wing? I think he needs a little bit of guidance. And it's worked. And they've been able to help each other. So first of all, not taking teenagers lightly. I think one of the big mistakes we have is just thinking all they want to do is eat pizza. So number one, yeah, we got to do things like that. I always have wacky games and things when I meet with them. We don't just sit down and pray the rosary at a meeting. Sure, we have games, and yes, we do end with pizza, and socializing is important. I give them time for that. But they do look for the topic of the meeting, and they look forward to it, and they actively participate in it. And when they do that and get active in the life of the parish, that changes them completely. And they have the enthusiasm to go out and make a difference in the world that sometimes we as adults have kind of lost, that we give up on it. They haven't given up on life yet. So, number one, don't patronize them. Secondly, let them be active and know that they are important to the life of the parish. The more importance they feel, the more they will do, and the more it reaches other people. And adults are always very pleased when they see lots of young people active. Teenagers, especially high school kids involved in altar serving. A lot of parishes I know try starting altar servers at young ages, 2nd and 3rd grade. And they look cute and they're willing at that point, but then by the time they're in 7th or 8th grade, they're tired of it. They've been doing it too long and they drop out before high school. I start them in 5th grade, and I specifically do things to make sure that there's something for the high school kids to be able to do, that they look forward to that. And one thing I learned about working with teenagers and young people, children as well as teens and adolescents, is if you ask little of them, they give nothing. If you ask much of them, they give everything. And don't be afraid to challenge them. Don't dumb down the message. That's another thing that I found in teen clubs and things that I've seen over the years, that people are afraid to bring up anything controversial with the kids, because if you mention something they don't like, they might leave. Well, what did Jesus do with controversial things? Remember the whole story of in John chapter 6 when Jesus gave the great discourse on the bread of life. And he told them this was dealing out or spelling out everything about the Eucharist. Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life within you. For my flesh is real food and my blood real drink. And what happened at the end? After that, many people left. They wandered away from him. How did Jesus respond? Let's look at what he didn't do. He didn't go after them and say, oh, all right, you don't like that? Okay, well, come on back, let's take a vote. How many of you like that Eucharist thing and how many of you don't? All right, majority of you don't like it? Okay, well, then we'll change that. I'll change that teaching. What do you want me to teach you? Anything, just as long as you stay with me. No, with a heavy heart, he let them go. They were not ready to follow him. We want young people following the Lord, and involved, but we want them truly following Jesus, not just counting the number of people that are there. And sometimes that even goes to be said about parishes in general. When you see parishes that are afraid to say anything controversial because the people might leave. And so we just try to make everything nice and sweet and fluffy so that nobody will have any reason to leave. And it's what I like to call marshmallow theology. Offering people things every Sunday that are nice and soft and fluffy and tasty, but have no nutritional value whatsoever. Everybody likes a marshmallow once in a while. But if you tried to live on marshmallows, what would happen? You'd get sick to your stomach, and the thought of another marshmallow would even make you absolutely sick at the very thought of it, and maybe even want to throw up at it. Sorry to mention that during lunch. You certainly don't want to go out and bash people over the head. We wanted to present the truth to them, and present it charitably, but challenge them, encourage them to think it out. We do nobody any good by not talking about anything that might possibly be controversial and only say things that kids might want to hear, or we think they want to hear, or only ministering to them on our perceived idea of their desires. One of the things I've learned over the years is teens are not looking for rock masses in order to come to Mass. How many people out there, or how many radio stations are there that play music in the Marty Hagen style of music that teenagers listen to? And even if you put rap masses and rock things like that in, maybe the people who are there will appreciate that and say, oh, I like it, it sounds better. But first of all, we have to ask, is this appropriate for Mass? Is this the type of music we should be playing when we are participating in the suffering, death, and resurrection of Jesus over and over again? Is this befitting the moment? And secondly, I think the whole idea that that's what kids are looking for is a mistake. And it's a mistake that I made. Because when I was young, I used to believe in that. And we had, in my one parish I was in, we had a rock mass. Once a month on a Sunday night, we rocked the church with electric guitars and drums and everything. And many people who were there liked it. And it didn't bring a single extra teenager in. That's not the reason why they're not there. They're not there because they don't like the music, or the priest is boring, or they don't like this or they don't like that. And adults as well. That's the excuses they use. The real reason they're not there is because they don't see the reason to be there. They don't see the value of the Mass. Sadly, many people today will say, well, I'm spiritual, I want a relationship with God, but see no reason whatsoever of why they need to come to Mass and worship together as a community. And so I remind them heavily, number one, why do we need to go to Mass? To receive the body and blood of Jesus, so that he is with us and we are united with him on the cross, that every time we come to Mass, we are participating over and over again in Jesus' suffering, death, and resurrection, and having our sins forgiven. You can't do that sitting at home listening to a religious CD or anything like that. And secondly, by nature, we are social beings. We need the support of one another. And so that's why it is important that we come together as a community and make church as welcoming as possible, not only during the liturgy, but having plenty of things outside the Mass that people can be involved in, especially our young people. Let them be an active part of the parish and give them the challenge of the faith. I find that when you give them the truth of Christ, they're willing to follow it. Young people are capable of great faith. And sometimes I think because, as I was saying, because we're afraid that they might leave, we don't want to tell them the controversial things. But present it to them positively, and when they understand it, maybe they can follow it better. There's so many different things we can look at as to why young people are not coming to churches anymore. And it's not just the Catholic Church. Our Protestant brothers and sisters, our Jewish friends are going through the same thing. And there's many different reasons that are offered. And specifically as Catholics, there are things we could mention. Bishop Barron has done a lot of work about talking about why young people are not worshiping anymore and coming to church, why they're leaving in droves, that the majority of people who leave the church will leave between 18 and 24 years old. And that makes the largest group of or largest religious denomination in America today, the group known as the Nones, N-O-N-E-S, people with no religious affiliation whatsoever. Many of them believe in God. They're not atheists. They want to be spiritual, but they think, well, I can pray on my own. I don't need a formal religion. And of course, we see the mistake with that, but how do we reach them? Well, I think the best way to reach them is engage them. Engage them in an honest conversation. Many of the things that young people believe, why they don't think they need to go to church or why they would reject the Catholic faith, when we look at their reasons, we discover they are patently false. Number one, for example, lots of young people say they don't believe in the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church is anti-intellectual and against science. Well, we know that's absolutely not true. Who created the university system? Who still has the greatest universities in the world? The Catholic Church. How many of us still have Catholic parishes and we're working so hard at education? Some of the greatest scientists and teachers over the centuries have been popes and priests. So they're mistaking the born-again Christians with us. The born-again Christians are the ones that just pick up the Bible and everything you read in there and you don't need science, you don't need anything else. That's their argument, but it's not ours. And sadly, somehow, our young people are mistaking the born-again Christians' argument against science and belief for the Catholic belief. So that's one that's patently false. Another one, sadly, is that the church is anti-gay people and anti-women because of our stand against gay marriage and abortion and all that. And of course we know that, again, that is patently false. We are not anti-anyone. We are in favor of what God has revealed to us. And so, therefore, when we talk about the seal of the covenant of marriage, that the sexual act is the seal of the covenant, and it precludes anybody who is not a man and a woman permanently joined to each other in a marriage or a bond of love open to procreation, well, of course, anybody who is not in that, we cannot allow them to enter into marriage. We say, no, that would be sinful because it's a violation of the purpose of the sexual act. But we're not anti those people. We don't hate them, which unfortunately the world today very quickly likes to jump at things and say, if you disagree with me, you're hate-filled. During the AIDS crisis, when it was a big thing going on, nobody was stronger than the Catholic Church about talking against homosexual acts and the sinfulness of a homosexual action. Yet, at the same time, nobody offered more beds for AIDS patients than the Catholic Church. So reminding our young people, yes, we very much hate sin, but we love the sinner. And we will do everything we can to call people to follow Christ, but we will not mistakenly try to tell you, well, if it's going to be difficult for you, it's going to be a challenge, well then, all right, we'll just ignore that teaching, because that does nobody any good. No, we certainly do not hate people. And when they talk about we hate women because of abortion and our stand on that, and that we don't honor women at all, who honors women more than the Catholic Church in our honoring of the Blessed Mother? We give more honor to a woman after Jesus than to anyone else. Other ones, people say today about, well, they're not, they don't want to go to church because they're disillusioned by the sexual scandal among the clergy. Well, that was true maybe for many of the adults, people in our own time. But the sexual scandal broke in the year 2002. That was 16 years ago. Our teenagers today, even our 18-year-olds, were only 2 years old when that was happening. It's not on their radar, and many of them are even shocked to hear that there was a scandal. They have not grown up with it, and we automatically assume that's part of it. But when you talk with young people, they discover that's really not there. And the reason they're not becoming priests is not because of that. There's another reasons, and that maybe could be a talk for another time. But not that whole mentality. That's just not there. One of the big ones that really is there, that is spot on, that we do have to address, is the fact that young people do not come to church because they see following a religious denomination as somehow an opposition to American freedom. That we see freedom today as I have to be free to do what I want to do, and nobody can set rules for me. And who said this best but Pope Benedict XVI, just before he became Pope, in the conclave after the death of St. John Paul II that elected him, in his final homily to the cardinals beforehand, he mentioned that the world today is under the dictatorship of relativism. That young people today believe that what's true for you is maybe not true for me, and nobody can tell me you are right or you are wrong. There are no absolute truths. And especially here in America, where it seems to violate everything we imagine is part of American freedom, then many of our young people think by going to the church and submitting to teachings that we're somehow stifling our freedom and we're giving it away. And of course, it's patently false. But that is one argument that is indeed valid, and it's spot on. How do I like to address it with young people? I ask them to think it through. Lots of young people today, and many people today, just get feelings. They hear something and they say, well, that's what I feel, but they don't think it through. So rather than just telling them, oh, you're wrong, you're a sinner, or whatever, I say, all right, let's think that through. So when they say there are no absolute truths, this is one of the arguments I use with them. Okay, first of all, is that statement true? That there are no absolute truths? Is that an absolute truth? The statement is self-defeating, because if you say there are no absolute truths, well, that's an absolute truth. So they say, okay, but even now the transgender issue, which has become very big in lots of the young people who now think that you can just choose to be whatever gender you want. Rather than just arguing and yelling with them, I said, all right, well, let's think that through. So science and math is a part of science. All right, you say there are no scientific truths. Okay, well, let's say you get a job after school, and you're going to be paid $10 an hour to work this job. So you do, and you work 10 hours that week, and at the end of the week comes the time to get your paycheck, right? So you come and get your pay envelope, and you open up the envelope, and in the envelope is only $20. Well, what do you say? Right away, you go to the boss and say, excuse me, I think you made a mistake. I get paid $10 an hour, and I worked 10 hours. That should be $100. Oh, well, no, that's your truth. That's not my truth. I work in a different mathematical system. In my system, 10 times 10 is only 20. So I'm not doing you any injustice. Take your money and go home. Would the kids say, oh, all right, fair enough? Absolutely not. You're going to scream bloody murder over that. And they know that. The fact is, we work with conventions, even if they could be different, even only conventional or conditional truths, that we're working in base 10. Oh, well, that would be the number. I work in base 6. Well, no. We all have to agree as to what the financial rules are. Imagine somebody who goes into a car dealer and there's a car he wants to buy. It's $45,000. And he brings out a quarter and says, in my opinion, or in my beliefs, this quarter is worth $45,000, so I want that car. Not happening. So right away, we can prove to them we need to have authentic truths and absolute things that we all agree upon as conventions. Otherwise, we'd have chaos. But sometimes you can get them to think through that, and they say, all right, fair enough. Science, math, yeah, okay, I can see where truths have to be truths. I can't just decide I'm going to be a giraffe tomorrow, and then the next day after that I want to be an elephant, and the day after that maybe I want to be a chimpanzee. Well, of course, we realize you just can't do that. And most kids, when they think it through, will realize that. But morals, they decide, oh, but absolutely not. Not when it comes to morals. You can't tell me what I believe is wrong. And how many times kids, especially in the 8th grade, when I teach them, will say that. So I say to them, okay, then let's stick with that. Let's look it through. Imagine you're 16, you get a brand new car, your parent buys you a new car for your birthday. Much as I'm opposed to parents, I don't care how much money they have buying a kid a brand new car for his 16th birthday. I always believe a child needs to buy their own car, let the father match dollar for dollar so that they take care of it. But nevertheless, that's another talk. But all right, so you got this brand new car for your birthday, and you're all excited, and you drive it to school, and you show all of your friends, you want to come and see this new car I got. And you go out to the parking lot, and the car is not there. So you realize right away somebody has stolen the car. So you call the police and you give them the license plate, and the police go out, and within very little time they find the person, they arrest him and bring him back with the car. So what do you say to the person? You stole my car. Imagine if the person says, oh no, I didn't do anything wrong. In my moral beliefs, I don't believe that anybody should be allowed to own anything personally, that everything should be open for the use of anybody else who wants to use it. So therefore, I should be allowed to use your car. That's what I believe. So I've done nothing wrong, and you should allow me to use your car. Are you going to say, okay, well then here's the keys. Okay, just make sure you put gas in it. Well, of course not. You're going to say to them, I'm sorry. You can't impose that moral belief of yours on me. I am not going to be forced to follow your beliefs. But then they could turn around and say, but who are you to impose your morals on me? I don't believe that. Who's to say your morals are right and my morals are wrong? My friends, I tell them every single law is an imposition of one person's morals on somebody else, because without it, we'd have anarchy, we'd have bedlam. Whether or not something is right or wrong, okay, that's a legitimate question that we can debate in courts and in moral things, moral situations in churches, fair enough. But to say there are no moral absolutes in itself is a dangerous thing to say. And when you get young people thinking of that, then they start seeing differently. And even when it comes to the faith also, getting them to see the gospel teaching. Present them the real Jesus, not the dumbed down, watered down version of what I like to call the Kumbaya philosophy. For 50 years now, we've been trying to have churches where don't say anything challenging and let's just sing Kumbaya and all that stuff. It's not working. If it had been working, we'd have 50 years by now. It should have worked. I think we need to admit all of this has been a colossal failure. And our young people, I'm discovering more and more, are looking for more traditional forms of worship, more elevated things at Mass. They appreciate adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. They appreciate incense at Mass. They appreciate, some of them are even enjoying Gregorian chant and the use of Latin. I'm not a fan of the Tridentine Mass, saying go back to that, but we can certainly do the Novus Ordo, the new rite, especially with our new translation that many people complained about when it first came out a few years ago. Personally, I've grown in love with it because I say the elevated language helps us remember we're doing something more important here. We are participating in the suffering, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And that should have a more formal language to it rather than a back at you padre and a yo, what up type of language which we had been using before. Take it seriously, take them seriously, and believe that they can be changed by the gospel of Jesus. Don't dumb it down. Don't think they don't want to hear the truth. In fact, they do. And when they do, when they find the truth in Christ, it changes them completely. I always tell young people, how many people in the world are looking to find themselves? They're looking for happiness, and they're looking in all the wrong places. You want to know happiness? You want to know peace? Be what God created you to be, and you will have happiness, and you will have peace. It's as simple as that. And of course, it challenges you to live differently. In fact, in this day and age, obviously to be a Christian means we have to live differently from the other people around us. And young people actually sometimes like that challenge to be different, to see things differently. And when they pray, when they give themselves to the Lord and they do something differently and it changes them, like many of our young people have discovered how good they feel when they've been through one of our activities of raising money for the poor, it changes them. They find a character in that. They find a dignity in that. And it elevates them. It lifts them up and it makes them want more. The more Jesus you give them, the more they want. The less Jesus you give them, the less inclined they're going to be to want him. Don't be afraid to challenge our young people. They are very much up to the challenge. Love them, understand them. I always try to make sure I know what's happening in their lives, the things that they're interested in. Give them plenty of opportunities for fun. We have a variety show every year, and the teenagers do a lot of different skits in it, and they have a lot of fun with that. So everything doesn't have to be the formal rosary and things like that. But give them Christ, and they will find him. In 2.5 weeks, we're leaving on a pilgrimage, a youth pilgrimage to Rome, where 20 young people from our parish are going on the trip. And I'm very happy that while I've had some kids in the past that were just looking to get away from their parents for a week or two and eat gelato and real Italian food, these young people are looking forward to the spiritual element of it, that I've told them the different churches where we're celebrating Mass. They're excited about that. I've told them that we will also pray the rosary. We will have spiritual things. We've had spiritual days leading up to it, and they want it, and it's changing their friends. There may not be many of them, but those who are there are serving the Lord well, and they are the hope for the future. And that's the only thing that's going to work. Not going out and giving them more of what we've been doing the past 50 years, somehow deluding ourselves to thinking that this is the path or the solution. Obviously, it's a colossal failure. It has not worked to bring people to the faith. And even one thing that I'm not stooping too low to do with teenagers in their rebellious period, when I was young, I remember how many of us, not myself personally, but I knew many teenagers rebelled against their parents who were faithful Sunday worshipers, and the fights in the family, you will go to church every Sunday or you will move out because no child of mine doesn't go to church on Sunday. Well, many of us went through that. But now their parents are not going to church. So I try to tell them, how about you rebel against your parents by going to church on Sunday? I've actually had several teenagers bring their parents back to church by them getting involved and then almost embarrassing their parents into, you know what, we never gave him this. And some of their parents have even become faithful members of the parish and the church life through their children. God can do amazing things, especially through young people. Sometimes I think they're able to do a lot more than we are because they still have that enthusiasm and they are not jaded by the disillusions and the discouragements that we've had in our lives. Take them seriously. Give them an authentic encounter with Jesus. Don't dumb down the message. Give them Christ as he reveals himself. And you will find that maybe we won't have great numbers of teenagers, but those who will be there will be truly serving the Lord and serving one another, and they will revive the life of our parishes and the life of our church. Therein is our future. Don't take them for granted. Take them seriously. Give them Christ, and they will change the world. Thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.